There is a moment, often too small to notice, where your life begins to fracture. It is not when everything collapses, nor when failure becomes undeniable. It is earlier than that. It is the moment you hesitate when you should have acted, the moment you think when you should have moved. In that hesitation, something weak is born, and it grows quietly with every delayed decision. In the way of the samurai, hesitation was not a minor flaw, it was death. A warrior who paused to negotiate with his emotions in the middle of combat would not survive long enough to correct his mistake. And yet, in modern life, hesitation is everywhere. It disguises itself as overthinking, as caution, as the need to be sure. But beneath all of it lies the same root, an inability to make cold decisions. This is the discipline of cold decisions, the art of removing the noise within so that action becomes clean, direct, and irreversible. Chapter 1. The Weight of Thought. There was a young man named Kaito who believed he was thoughtful. He prided himself on analyzing every choice, considering every possible outcome, and delaying action until he felt ready. To others, he appeared intelligent, even wise, but beneath that surface, his life remained stagnant, quietly eroding under the weight of his own thoughts. Each morning he would wake with intention. He would tell himself that today would be different. Today he would act. But as the hours passed, decisions began to stack. Small ones at first, whether to begin his work now or later, whether to confront a problem or avoid it, whether to follow through or postpone. And each time he paused, examined, and delayed. By the end of the day, nothing meaningful had been done, not because he lacked ability, but because he lacked decisiveness. His mind had become a battlefield where no action survived. In the teachings of Zen, there is a principle of directness, to see clearly and to act without distortion. But Kaito's mind was not clear, it was crowded. Every decision carried the weight of imagined consequences, and so he chose the safest path, the path of inaction. What he did not realize was that inaction is also a decision, and it is often the most destructive one.
Chapter 2. The Warrior's Mind. Centuries earlier, warriors trained not just their bodies, but their minds. A samurai did not wait to feel ready. He trained until readiness was no longer required. His actions were not guided by emotion, but by discipline, refined through repetition. There is a story of a swordsman who was asked how he remained calm in battle. He replied that he did not attempt to be calm. He simply removed everything that was not the strike. No fear, no doubt, no excess thought. Only the action remained. This is what separates a trained mind from an undisciplined one. The undisciplined mind adds layers. It complicates. It hesitates. The trained mind subtracts. It removes until only what is necessary remains. Kaito had never learned this. He believed control meant thinking more, but control in the way of the warrior meant thinking less. Not through ignorance, but through clarity. One evening, after another day lost to hesitation, Kaito found himself staring at a simple task he had avoided for weeks. It was not difficult. It did not require exceptional skill, but it required a decision to begin without certainty. For the first time, he noticed something. The resistance he felt was not logical, it was emotional. It was the discomfort of stepping into action without guarantees. And in that realization, something shifted. He began to understand that his problem was not complexity, it was attachment. Attachment to outcomes, to comfort, to the illusion of control. Chapter 3. Cutting Through Illusion. The next morning, Kaito made a small decision. He would no longer negotiate with himself. When a task appeared, he would act before the mind had time to interfere. No debate, no delay, just movement. At first, it felt unnatural. His mind resisted. It tried to pull him back into familiar patterns of analysis. But he had made the decision cold, without emotion, and so he followed through.
He noticed something unexpected. The action itself was not painful. The anticipation had been the true burden. The moment he began, the weight disappeared.
This is the illusion that traps most people. They believe the difficulty lies in the action, but in reality, the difficulty lies in the thinking before the action. The longer you think, the heavier it becomes. The samurai understood this deeply. They trained to act immediately, not because they were impulsive, but because they had already removed uncertainty through discipline. Their decisions were made long before the moment required them. Kaito began to apply this principle to everything. Small actions first. Standing up when he intended to stand. Starting when he intended to start. Ending what needed to end. Each decision executed without hesitation. And slowly, something changed. The noise in his mind began to quiet. Chapter 4. The Silence of Precision. As days turned to weeks, Kaito's life began to take on a different rhythm. There was less internal dialogue, fewer arguments within himself. His actions became sharper, more direct. He no longer waited for motivation. He no longer searched for the perfect moment. When something needed to be done, he did it, not with force, but with clarity. This is the essence of cold decisions. They are not emotional. They are not driven by excitement or fear. They are precise, like a blade that cuts only what is necessary. In Zen practice, there is a focus on presence, to be fully in the moment without distraction. But presence is not passive. It demands action aligned with what is in front of you. Kaito began to experience this. When he worked, he worked. When he rested, he rested. There was no overlap, no lingering thoughts pulling him away. His mind, once scattered, became unified. But the transformation was not complete. There remained one final test, the ability to act when it truly mattered. Chapter 5. The Moment of Decision. Opportunity rarely announces itself. It appears suddenly, often disguised as risk. One day, Kaito was presented with such a moment, a decision that carried weight, a path that required commitment without certainty. His old self would have hesitated. He would have analyzed, delayed, and eventually allowed the moment to pass. But now, something was different. He felt the familiar pull of doubt, but he did not engage with it. He did not try to resolve it. He simply observed it, and then he acted. The decision was made quickly, cleanly, without emotional interference. And in that moment, he understood something profound. The power was not in choosing the perfect path. It was in choosing without hesitation. The outcome was uncertain, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was that he had acted in alignment with a disciplined mind. This is where most people fail. They seek certainty before action, but certainty is a luxury that rarely exists. The warrior does not wait for certainty. He creates clarity through action. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Elimination. Kaito began to see that discipline was not about adding more effort, but about removing what weakened him. The constant thinking, the unnecessary options, the internal negotiations, all of it had created friction, and friction was the true enemy of action. He simplified his life with intention. Decisions that once required thought became automatic. He chose fixed times for his work, fixed routines for his body, and clear boundaries for his attention. Not because rigidity was ideal, but because it removed the need to decide repeatedly. This is a principle found in the way of bushido. A warrior does not rely on mood or circumstance. He creates systems that eliminate variability. In doing so, he preserves his energy for what truly matters. Kaito realized that every unnecessary decision was a leak, a slow drain on his focus, and so he began to close those leaks one by one. His environment became quieter, his actions became fewer, but more intentional. In that simplicity, his mind found something it had never known before: space. Chapter 7. Identity forged in action. There's a misconception that identity is something you discover. In truth, it is something you build through repeated action. The samurai did not wait to feel like warriors. They acted as warriors until the identity became inseparable from their being. Kaito stopped asking himself what he felt like doing. He stopped measuring his actions against his emotions. Instead, he asked a single question. What does a disciplined man do in this moment? And then he did it. At first, it felt like imitation, a performance of a version of himself that did not yet fully exist. But over time, the repetition carved something deeper. His actions began to align without effort. The gap between intention and execution closed. This is the quiet transformation that most never notice. It is not dramatic, it does not announce itself, but one day you look back and realize that the person who hesitated no longer exists. In his place stands someone who moves with clarity. Chapter 8. The Absence of Noise. As Kaito continued this path, he encountered something unexpected. The silence within him was no longer uncomfortable, it was stable, almost unshakable. Before, silence had been filled with doubt, with questions, with imagined outcomes. Now it was empty in the most powerful sense. There was nothing unnecessary left to interfere. This is what Zen points toward. Not the absence of thought entirely, but the absence of useless thought. A mind that responds only when needed and remains still otherwise. In this state, decisions became effortless. Not because they were easy, but because there was no resistance. The mind no longer stood in opposition to action. Kaito understood then that the goal was never to control every thought. It was to stop feeding the ones that created hesitation. And in doing so, he had removed the very source of his struggle. Chapter 9. Precision without emotion. There's a difference between being emotional and being alive. The samurai did not suppress emotion because they were cold, but because emotion, when unchecked, distorts perception.
Kaito learned to separate feeling from action. He did not deny discomfort, nor did he chase pleasure. He simply refused to let either dictate his decisions. When something needed to be done, it was done. Whether he felt resistance or ease became irrelevant. His actions were guided by clarity, not by internal states. This is the discipline of cold decisions. Not cruelty, not detachment from life, but precision. The ability to act without being pulled in different directions by fleeting emotions. In this, there is a kind of freedom that few experience. A freedom not of choice, but of execution. Chapter 10. The Unseen Advantage. To an outside observer, Kaito's life did not appear extraordinary. There were no dramatic displays, no sudden transformations that could be easily recognized. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. He moved faster, not in speed, but in decision. He wasted no time in hesitation. He conserved his energy for action. And because of that, his progress became consistent. This is the unseen advantage of a disciplined mind. It does not rely on bursts of motivation. It does not collapse under pressure. It simply continues, step by step, with unwavering precision. Most people search for intensity. They believe change requires force, emotion, or extreme effort. But the samurai understood something different. True strength is quiet, it is controlled, it is sustained over time. Kaito had become this without realizing it.
Conclusion. The way of cold decisions. In the end, nothing external had changed the course of Kaito's life. There was no single breakthrough, no moment of sudden enlightenment. There was only a series of small, cold decisions made without hesitation, and that was enough. The discipline of cold decisions is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming unaffected by fear. It is not about knowing the right path. It is about walking without delay. Every moment presents a choice, to think or to act, to hesitate or to move. And in that choice, your life is shaped. The samurai did not wait for clarity to appear. They created it through action. They understood that the mind, when left unchecked, becomes an obstacle, But when disciplined, it becomes a blade, sharp, precise, and silent. If there is one thing to carry forward, it is this. Do not negotiate with hesitation. Do not give it space to grow. When the moment arrives, act. Not with emotion, not with doubt, but with the quiet certainty of a mind that has already decided.
This channel is for those who wants to build discipline quietly. If that's you, hit the subscribe button.